Well, here's something I'm surprised to see on this channel again. It's another 1950s outboard that doesn't run, which is perfect because it goes with the boat I don't have. This is an early 50s to late 40s Elgin Outboard sold by Sears. I picked this outboard up along with a parts machine about 2 years ago. I'm not sure of the exact horsepower rating, but I think it's right around 5. I had almost decided to part this motor out, but I'm glad I didn't. As you can see by the pile of parts standing around, I started working on this one before I started filming it. This is the parts motor that came with it. It's not an identical machine, it has a slightly smaller power head and a different lower unit, but the parts are close enough that I can more or less just switch them over. Parts for these old Elgins are pretty scarce nowadays and pretty expensive when you do find them, whereas the motors themselves aren't actually worth all that much, so having a parts machine can make all the difference here. You may notice that the cowling is half taken off already, and the head is completely removed. And that's because I'm actually bringing you in halfway through this video. When I started working on this, I never expected that this would work. I was just kind of curious as to why it was seized. And I'll show you why that is. So after I took the head off, I noticed that there was actually a very small amount of play in each one of these cylinders. And I thought at first maybe it just had bad bearings, and that was what was allowing a little bit of the play. But then I remembered something that I really should have thought of before, which is that these motors, unlike most newer motors, they're direct drive, meaning there is no shift linkage back and forth. So when this motor is spinning, that is to say when the flywheel is turning over, the prop is also turning over. And that's what made me look at the lower end. So when I removed this prop for the first time, I found out why this outboard had really been seized. Now I've gotten most of it out already, but you can still see there's a lot of what looks to be not grease, come on, focus. It's more like a sawdust-like material. And that had completely filled the lower end. It was just straight sawdust-like gunk. I'm not really 100% certain what it is. Some sort of sediment that got in and mixed with the grease and turned solid over the years. And it turns out that's all that was keeping the motor from turning over. Once I had taken that out, I could freely and easily by hand rotate that flywheel, and the motor was free. At first I had been a little bit cross at myself for not coming to this conclusion a year or two earlier. And then I remembered the other issue with this motor. Obviously I've already had this flywheel off. It would never come off that easily on its own. And that's my ignition system. So this outboard is just using a coil magneto ignition system, which is pretty standard for the time. You can see that somebody has already done a little bit of work in here. I know for sure that these condensers here are not original because they do not match the pictures I've seen online, and they don't match the rest of the motor. And I also know for sure that one of these coils is bad. So the way I determine whether or not I have working coils is just to put a multimeter to them. So I'll put one on the spark plug end and one up here. And you can see behind my hand that we have resistance. I'm not 100% certain what the value should be, but at least we know that it's not an open circuit, and right now that's good enough. So even though it does work on this one, so I know that this coil is okay, this one is not. There's a short somewhere internally, so I need a new coil, which they don't produce for these engines anymore, not even replicas. So the reason I can't just buy another coil for this is because of the laminate size. So the laminate, which is the arm that the coil sits on this machine is 5/8 large. And it's just a really unpopular size, and I wasn't able to find anything that fit it. So at least initially, I thought that that was probably the end of my journey. But it turns out I got maybe very lucky. So I've just gone ahead and moved our parts motor over to the engine stand, and we're going to see if we can get this laminate off, hopefully in one piece, and still being able to reuse some of these fasteners if we need to. Yeah, it was on there pretty well. Now, this seems like a good time to mention that even though I am familiar with points ignition, I am not the mastermind that some people have been who've been working on it for, longer than I've been alive. So if I make a mistake in my terminology or my understanding, by all means, feel free to let me know that in the comments. Ugh. And this is what I mean about that plastic. So this black plastic actually used to surround the whole that whole coil. Let's see if this fits onto our new motor or not. All right, with our new motor on the stand, let's get this laminate off. Ooh, well, that's interesting. This screw, both of these screws on the laminate on the parts motor were very difficult to remove, and on this one, that can't come out of there very well. That screw is also much longer. Oh yeah, way easier. Almost makes me wonder if this one maybe has been taken off before. I don't know if this screw is exactly how I plan to reattach things. There's going to have to be a little bit of changes done, I think, before this ever hits the water. But for now, we'll plop it back in. So with our laminates removed, this is the one from the parts motor, and this is the bad one from the current motor, and there's definitely quite a difference in size between them. Hopefully the new one is able to put out enough of a spark to jump the gap and still make ignition. I'm not making a performance motor here, I just want it to putt along. And it looks like, luckily, this will fit perfectly in place over the old one, which it should, because both ignition systems were made at the same time by the same people. The difference being, besides the thickness, is that this motor has a little nail right here and a little nail right there. And I'm not sure exactly what those are for, maybe just to help locate the laminates, or maybe something to do with holding the thicker laminate together. Either way, I'm going to have to cut those off before I put the new one on. So with those spikes out, we can try and put our new laminate on. And it looks to me, these holes are going to line up perfectly. That's one in. Yeah, wow. I mean, again, obviously this coil is still toasted. I have to replace it. But the thing is, I can replace it. And for $35, I can actually, believe it or not, order one for an OMC, which is Evan Reuter Johnson, which will accept the same size laminate. I'll be able to toss that on, and hopefully I should have spark. So it's been a few weeks since last I looked at that motor, but my new part is finally in, my new coil, and this is what's left of the old one here. I tried to take him off in one piece, but he just was not cooperating. But that doesn't matter because the laminate is in okay shape. I've taken a little bit of rust off of it. May take a little bit more off before it's done. And our new coil and laminate have arrived in the mail. So what I need to do is I need to take this coil off of this laminate, and I can throw that laminate away. And hopefully the inside diameter will be the same as this guy, which I believe he is. I'll put him on this laminate, and then we will shove him onto the motor and see if we get spark. So this is the new coil here. I've got him off the laminate. He came off luckily with no problem. And here is the old laminate. And if I put them together, and yes, I know this is the wrong way around. Actually, here we'll do it the proper way. Then they, so they slip together very nicely. So all I have to do now is press him on there. We'll throw them on the outboard, and then I'll bring you back, and we will see if we have spark. Okay, so this is everything all buttoned up. Our new one and our old one, it's pretty obvious to see the size difference. It's maybe not quite as dramatic as it looks because this guy has a cover on him. But this one is quite a bit smaller still. But what we're going to do to check and make sure we've actually got spark, because to tell you the truth, I don't know if this is going to work or not. This wire here is the guy coming out of that one, so I'm just going to put the top back on this. And we'll pull them over and see if we have spark. Now, I'm going to see if I can just spin this over by hand to get something. Oh, no luck so far. Let's see. Well, this looked a lot prettier 30 seconds ago, didn't it? This right here is the old spark plug wire. I know that this was good previously because I've actually shocked myself with it already when I first put that on there, so this was fine. But I tested it out, and I no longer have continuity, or at least I don't have reliable continuity through it. So somewhere in here, I suspect probably somewhere up near the top, maybe right around there, there's a break, and this guy is no good. And this is a spark plug wire from the parts motor. This motor is soon going to be about 50-50 from each. So it has a different end on it. But that doesn't really matter. For the purposes of testing, we'll be able to get it to run on this. And then before I take it out on the lake sometime, we'll just put a new spark plug wire on it. Actually, we'll probably put a new spark plug wires on both sides if I remember. So we will get this guy buttoned back up and we will try once again for spark. These wires might require a little bit of routing to make sure that they're not running into anything while the motor is moving. And obviously this screw here really holds no power at all. That'll all have to be switched out before the motor gets put in the water, and the same contraption is under here. But for testing purposes, you know, that'll do. Great, so before when I tested this, we had no continuity at all. But now, if I put one lead there, and the other lead there, you should see, yeah, continuity measured up top, which is excellent. Over here too. Yep, perfect. So now we'll try this again, and we should have spark. All right, take your bets now. Does this mismatch of a machine end up with spark? I honestly don't know. Hopefully this will give us a good enough connection to test with. Change these ends out. Actually, I'll change these whole wires out later on, but just for now. Ooh, I think I saw a spark. Oh yeah. Now I don't know how well it comes through in camera, but I'm seeing spark every rotation. Well, oh yeah, excellent. And that's just with my hands spinning it over. You know, I'm sure if I had a recoil rope going, it would be a much better spark. But to me, it looks totally fine. Yeah, again, with the frame rates and such, I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. I'll shut the lights off actually and I'll try it again. There, just make it a little bit easier. So yeah, that spark, I'm pretty sure that came through. That obviously makes me just extremely happy to see. Know that I haven't wasted my money, at least on that part of the outboard. So yeah, now that we've got spark, we'll move on. So what I would actually like to do the most here would be to just put the head back on, put a little bit of fuel into it, crank it over, and make sure the compression is good enough to get it to at least make a little bit of smoke for us, maybe kick over once or twice. But where this is a very old two-stroke, and I don't know when the last time it was ran, I want to get this carburetor off first and just take a look in behind it. Again, where it's two-stroke, that bottom end needs lubrication from the gas and oil mix going through it. So I want to get that carb off and maybe just spray a little bit of oil through the reeds. I know I've already done a whole lot of turning over on it, and it turns over pretty smooth. But I really don't like doing that. I am going to lubricate that bottom end before I even try to get it to fart at all. So that's going to be our next step. That and then carburetor. So I thought I hit record. I didn't. But all you missed was I took this carburetor off. And we'll take a look at that in a moment and see how clean it is inside. But before we do that, I want to work on getting access to these reeds here and being able to hopefully look at the bottom end of that crank and connecting rods. So I want to be able to do, if there's any debris in there, or if you've ever seen really old two-stroke gas, it kind of becomes almost like gritty over time. I want to be able to flush that out before I put any real gas into it. So we'll take that off, flush out the rear end, look into this carburetor, bottom end, and then slap it back together and see if she'll smoke for us. I actually might need to be where you're at to get on this one and get them out of there without breaking them. I mean, that is just, wow, it's really stuck on there and I don't want to damage it. So I'll bring you back when I've got that off. All right, I'm not too proud to admit my mistakes. Yeah, I have no excuse for that one. All right, so that those reeds come out of there immediately. Actually, pretty well as soon as I turn off the camera. Take a look at them. They look not too bad. I've got this faceplate back on there just so I don't lose the screws. I may have to take a look into them to see exactly how tight they should be, but to be honest, I'm not seeing any that seem obviously bent more than any other ones or looking at a place. I will take a look at that a little bit more, but unless I find something obviously wrong, we'll probably leave that. What I really wanted to get a look at, let's see if this light cooperates with us on the camera, it's right inside of there. So you can just see a little bit of that crank. There he goes, I spin him around. So there's none of that sort of debris that you see sometimes inside of two strokes. Not in this guy anyway. He turns around fully. Yeah, it's very clean in there. I'm still going to give him a little squirt of oil, but I feel fine about running this. It doesn't really matter what oil you use for this. It's just to help us for a little bit of startup lubrication. I'm sure somebody in the comments will be mad at me for that, but I think that we're fine. That squeaking noise you're hearing as I turn this around, that's not coming from the cranks. I know it's probably harder to tell that on the camera, but there's actually, where I took all that gunk out of the lower end, there's just a very slight squeak coming out of there. That's all that is. But up here, these two connecting rods, they've been lubricated, they're fine. So I think it's time we move on and take a look at this carburetor here. There's the brand, in case you've got one and you need the info. Now, I'm not going to be rebuilding this carburetor. All I'm going to do is just tear it apart, clean it out. If there's any obvious clogs, like in the jets or anything, I'll make sure to get those cleared out as well. But otherwise, that's it. I don't have a rebuild kit for this. I haven't even checked to see when it's available, and I'm really hoping that we don't need one. We can see that bowl is separating all on its own. I did notice there was gasket maker on it. Okay, and here we go. Oh no, that's a little bit of crud there. At least it wipes off easily, and it looks like maybe some silt on the bottom. I don't know if you can just kind of see that. It's either rust or silt. And the top looks better anyway. I would say that's probably clogged. But honestly, it's not too bad. Not really. I've seen a whole lot worse. As long as that float doesn't move very much, as long as it doesn't sink. Anyway, yeah, we'll get that all blown out and cleaned up. And I'm going to test that float too, make sure it doesn't sink. So this is a little bit interesting. I've been looking at this for a few minutes, and I've only really got one guess as to what's going on with the needle and seat. So the fuel on this guy comes in down here, but that doesn't really have an obvious exit point inside of the bowl. And this needle and seat, or this float here, if you look on the back, it doesn't really seem to have a needle and seat anywhere. So I'm thinking it must in some way actuate a needle going this way, possibly into that guy down there. But I'm not sure. I'm more familiar with carbs from the 70s and up. This is quite a bit older than that, and there's some really weird designs that go on older, at least older outboard carburetors. Probably others too, but I'm a little bit more used to the outboards. So that guy came out there nicely. These, yeah, oh, this one, sorry, other way. All these are made out of brass, and yeah, they're pretty soft. Let's see, that guy's kind of gunked up. Do I have a smaller one? Yes, I do. What's this? Oh, let's get a little bit more of it. Looks like sawdust. Maybe? Sawdust and rust? It feels like sawdust. Let's get that out of there. So I'm not 100% certain what I'm looking at. I'm guessing. Does that move as I move this guy? Okay. That might be my needle in the seat going back and forth. Or my needle in my seat going back and forth. I don't want to take this guy out if I don't have to. Oh yeah. Okay, that's going to be a joy. This is so this is the bolt thread, whatever, that goes through this guy here, and he's holding my float on. Yeah, not looking forward to unscrewing that. Actually, if we look, I should get a better light. If we look inside of that, it's very badly chewed up. Actually do I have a larger guy? You fit in there? Yeah, someone's obviously had a rough go at that a few times before. Oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please. Oh, are you turning or are you stripped? I can't tell. Oh, you're turning. Oh, thank goodness. Oh, yeah, that would not have been a good time. Okay, so we'll take him out. There we go. Yeah, that's exactly what that is. That's the hinge for our float. And here's the float himself. So we'll throw that in some water and hold him under and make sure that he floats. Okay, and this is, okay, so here's the tab on the float. I might bend that so that he sits a little higher. And this must be, little plunger would be my needle. Yeah, okay. Let's take a look at this needle. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Sometimes you'll see like a really obvious wear mark on the needle, and you can see a little bit of them there. Right at the top, the color's a little bit different, but there's no ridge on them. So I'm thinking that's probably going to seal just fine. Which is good, because that's another one of those items I couldn't really replace. And yeah, that hole looks, yeah, it does look pretty clear. Doesn't look like there's any debris in it, just what was in front of the needle. But I'll still shoot a little bit of carb cleaner at him and clean him out. And so while I clean up this guy, I'll bring you back. If I find anything interesting in here, I'm going to take the screw out. Yeah, and I'll clean out these jets a little bit. And And we'll see. I don't really suspect I'll find anything too bad in here. A little bit of carb cleaner should blow it out. And then we will put the whole thing back together. And we'll see if we can't get it to make a little bit of smoke for us. So with everything all cleaned up, I think we're going to put him back together. I'm going to slap a little bit of this black silicone adhesive from Permatex just around the outside, just to make a little bit of a gasket. It might not hold forever or very well. It is for high temperatures and fuel, so hopefully it hangs up. But I just need to put it back together enough just to see if it runs. And if it ends up being good but leaky, then you know what? I'll just make another gasket up for it. That's no big deal. Okay, well, we'll give that black silicone a little bit to dry, and then we'll see how it held up. Well, it's the next day now, and that carburetor gasket maker has hardened up for me. So I'm going to put these reed valves back on, and then we will put the carburetor back on. And at this point, once that's done, I guess we can just put the cowling back on the motor. I think I have a recoil start hanging around for this one somewhere too. And then we'll take it outside and see if it makes smoke for us. I'll spare you a few shots of the motor going back together. If you want to see that, you can just watch the first part of the video in reverse. With everything put back together, I think these vintage Elgin motors look really great, patina and all. So in order to give myself the best chance here, I'm just going to take a little bit of two-stroke gas mix, and I'm going to put it into each one of the cylinders. And I'm not going to worry about the bottom end, because earlier on I sprayed that down with oil. So I know that's still got plenty of lubrication. So get this little squirt. Probably too much. And yes, I am just leaving them finger tight while I pull it over. They're not going to blow out of there. Now, I also don't know if these wires are correct. I don't know if this guy goes to the top or the bottom. I don't remember. But I guess we're going to find out here real quick. All right, give it a shot. Hey! Just like that. Wow. That was first pull. Real little view of the smoke coming out of the bottom end there. Wow. Wow, that was not what I expected. Certainly not the very first time I gave it a pull over, too. Like I said, I've had this for years. I thought it was seized for most of the time I owned it. And very nearly abandoned it. Hey David, how you doing? Okay, well it's been a few days since I last got it to pop off there. Unfortunately the neighbor needed a hand with something, so that kind of took priority. But what I've decided to do today is I've got this tank here filling up. This is what I run my outboards in. And I'm going to put this into that tank and see if we can get the water pump to work on it. Now I don't know what kind of shape it's in. I'm really hoping that it's okay, at least for a little bit, because these are really difficult to source. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pack that full of grease. Well, first I'm going to clean it out, and then I'm going to pack it full of grease. Little older outboards like this often take grease instead of oil. So I'll just throw something in there now. It's good enough to test it out. Put the prop on. We will throw it into that tank, and then hopefully we'll get it to run a little longer, and we will see it pumping water. So I'm just going to give all this a flush here with a little bit of oil to try and get as much of this sawdust-like material out of it. I'm pretty certain that this sawdust slash oil, or not oil, but grease mix probably isn't going to harm anything. but I'd still like to get as much of it out as I can. I'll have to flush this out again after I put that new grease in there as well. But just for the sake of running it in the barrel to see how she goes, I think that this should be totally fine. I actually see it's a hole in this. I don't think that comes up on the camera right now. Interesting. You might be able to see, there we go. Just see it slightly there. Cover it with my finger. That's not good. I gotta take a look into that before I put it in the water. So I'm just gonna bring you around and give you a better shot of that hole. I've already taken a little look at it. Come on. If I can get the light to shine on it. There we go. So that's the hole in the back. On some motors, it is typical to have a little drainage hole there, and another one up top right around here if it's if the lower unit is oiled. This one is not oiled, it's greased, and that hole, yeah, there we go. That's not a regular shape. That's definitely this struck something at some point. I would say put that hole in there, and that would explain why it's all full of gunk inside. So I'm probably just going to try and plug that right now permanently. I'm not quite sure what I'll do about it. But for right now, a little bit of silicone plug or something will at least keep the water out of it. And that should be good enough just to run in the barrel. All right, well, in my professional amateur opinion, I would say that that's about as cleaned out as it's going to get. So I'm going to fill this guy up with some marine quality grease. And then I will stuff the propeller back on, and I think at that point we're ready to go. Alright, so I got that guy packed full of grease, and I've had a little bit of grease on the side of the propeller as well. I've also cleaned up those mating surfaces a little bit. I'm not really too worried about them. Is that one up and a down? I think this is up. Okay. And I'll slide him in. Perfect. Alright, now if you're watching this and you're having, thoughts to yourself about why things are put in the way they are, why I skipped things like not replacing the condensers up top, or why I left the wires hooked up with a screw, or why I'm not tearing into this impeller right away, and they're fair questions, but ultimately the answer just comes down to the fact that on a motor like this, you really never know if it's good or not until it's running in the water. When your motors are this old, it's really difficult to come by parts for them. And it can only take one part you can't source, one little disaster, really, to completely stop a build like this. And I've just realized I've got the wrong screw going in there. So that's why I'm kind of leaving things half done. It's more important first to make sure that it runs, and it runs at least somewhat reliably before I put it into use. Than it is to start replacing every little thing. So if this does do well, then I'll go back and I'll do it up properly. Make the connections a little more secure, replace the spark plug wires, yada yada. But right now, I just want to see if it'll run at all. If it runs nicely, then I'll make sure and I'll do all that sort of nitpicky stuff later on. So we've got our all set up now. The fuel is on. Everything's back together. I have washed this tank out a little bit just to make sure it's not too gross inside. And we're ready to pull it over and see if it runs. My only concern at the moment is that there seems to be a leak actually coming out at the top of the carburetor, which is a little bit surprising. But at least for right now, we'll just see if she pucks. There's also a whole bunch of settings back here. I don't really have the original letters anymore that kind of tell you where all the knobs go, so I'm taking a little bit of a best guess here. Okay, well, to make this a little easier on myself, I think I'm going to pull those spark plugs out. I'm going to put a little bit of this in, like we did the first time we got it to pop off, and just make sure this is a fuel delivery problem, and I haven't just lost spark again. Okay, so I've got a little bit of fuel poured directly into the cylinders. We're going to give this another go again. That'll let us know if we're just having a fuel delivery problem, or if I've once again lost spark. Hopefully we should see it cut off right away. definitely just fuel delivery. That ran excellent. Ooh, even smells like an old two-stroke. Alright, well, I know I definitely didn't lose spark. So we're going to give this another shot. Play around with the settings back here just a tiny bit more. And see if we can get it to run at least off what's in the fuel bowl. Oh, there was a kick there. Well, hey. Holy Moses, I could hardly be happier with that. That was running just off of what was in the carburetor. I did put I put my feed bottle down and filled up the carburetor manually from that. I'm not really sure what's going on with this line. I did clear this out earlier. This tank seemed to be okay, but there might just be a little bit of debris stopping fuel from filling the carburetor up properly. Yeah, that worked really well. I'm floored, really, considering how sort of half put together this is. I even got it to idle down quite a bit there before we ran out of fuel. No problem. Water pump was very strong. That was kind of my main concern. I think I might have one extra water pump in the other lower unit of this machine. The one that came in the parts unit. I don't know if they match or not. I suspect that they will. But yeah, how about that? I never could leave well enough alone. I'm going to give it another shot. See if it might be pulling out what's in the tank. I don't think there's much more in the tank anyway, but we'll see. Yeah, I think she's probably just about had it for fuel. So it doesn't seem to like when I play with the timing over here on this side. I may have to adjust the mix a little bit. But yeah. How about that? I still can't get over that stream of water I had coming out. That's a really strong stream. Those impellers, sometimes they just, if they're old, they break apart as soon as you start them on, or as soon as you turn them on. That one didn't. Yeah, really just couldn't be happier. Alright, well, I've had it running for maybe 15 or 20 minutes now in total. Combined runtime anyway. And it seems like the only issue I'm having is that this line right here, which comes from the fuel tank, which is right here, keeps clogging. There's probably a little bit of wood dust or solidified oil, something that's sitting in there, and I can blow it out, but within maybe a minute or two it comes back, and then she starts for fuel. I can, however, keep it running as long as I want off of just off of the feeder bottle there. So I'm not really too worried about the health of the engine. It seems to be fine. It's probably just that tank that needs to be blown out. So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot more really to say right now about this. I'm still shocked that it works. And I'm hoping maybe if I can make a drop-down plate for it, I might use this on the back of my Argo when I'm hunting and fishing, just to help me cross small lakes and such, because this is a very, very light unit. And if I can get it to start as easily as I can right now, further down the road when it's cold and such out, then that would be lovely. And hopefully that is the fate of this outboard. Now that I know it's a good runner, I'll go back and improve on some of those temporary fixes just so that this motor stays reliable for years to come. Just because it's old doesn't mean it won't be used. But I think that just about does it for this video. If you choose to subscribe to this channel, then you may see this outboard again in action a little later on down the line when I toss it on my Argo. Thanks for watching.